The first scream echoed off the lake like a loon in heat. I had just clicked the lock shut on my new dock gate when I heard it sharp, high-pitched, and laced with pure outrage. "What do you think you're doing, Quentin?" I turned around, already knowing who it was. Nobody else in the neighborhood had a voice that could pierce concrete like Odessa Sharp, HOA president and full-time menace. She stormed down the gravel path in those ridiculous wedge heels she wore to every HOA meeting, clipboard tucked under one arm like it was an extension of her spine. "I'm locking my dock," I said. "You know, the one I paid for, on my property." Odessa's eyes narrowed like I just insulted her cat and her hairdresser in the same breath. "That dock is community access." "You can't just put a gate on it." I pointed to the survey marker I'd had installed a week ago. "It's on my deed, Odessa. The HOA map was outdated. County records confirmed it last month. This dock is entirely on my lot." She paused just for a second. Then the gears started turning behind those overly plucked eyebrows. "You didn't request permission from the board." "I don't need your permission to secure my own property. The county said so. I even filed a notice with the HOA." "You'd know that if you actually read your mail." Her face turned the color of boiled lobster. "I'm the president of this association, Quentin. You don't get to do whatever you want." I folded my arms. "Neither do you." She whipped out her phone and spun around, storming back up the path. I heard her mutter something about violations and unauthorized modifications. By dinner, I had an email from the HOA claiming I owed a $500 fine for tampering with shared recreational access. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my ribs. The next morning, I found a handwritten note duct taped to the dock gate. "Remove the lock or face legal consequences, HOA board." That's when I installed the security camera. Because if Odessa was going to play dirty, I was going to play smart. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of metal clinking. Not the usual birds or the hum of early boats on the water. This was sharper, more deliberate. I pulled on a hoodie and stepped outside, half expecting to find raccoons. Instead, I saw a man in khakis and a blue polo shirt crouched at the dock gate, fiddling with the lock. He had bolt cutters in one hand and a laminated badge clipped to his belt that read HOA Maintenance Authorized Access. I didn't say a word. I just tapped my phone screen and watched the security feed from the camera I'd mounted on the back porch. The entire fiasco was being recorded from 3 angles. When he noticed me, he straightened up fast. "Just conducting routine access maintenance," he said without making eye contact. "Funny," I said, walking closer, "because that's a private dock and you're trespassing." He looked around like I'd sprung a trapdoor under his feet. "I was instructed by the HOA, and the HOA doesn't own this property." I cut him off. "You might want to leave before I call the county sheriff." He hesitated, glanced at the camera, then back at the lock. "They told me it was part of the shared. Tell Odessa I've already submitted the property survey to the Registry of Deeds. And if this lock gets touched again, I'll press charges." He left without another word, climbing into a white HOA pickup and peeling off like a teenager caught sneaking out. I spent the rest of the day compiling everything. Emails from the county assessor, the certified deed with GPS coordinates, the time-stamped footage from my cameras, and a note detailing the attempted lock cutting. I uploaded it all to a secure drive and sent a copy to my attorney, a quiet but thorough woman named Nora who used to prosecute zoning fraud for the city. By sundown, I had a voicemail from the sheriff's office. A deputy had reviewed the footage and wanted to meet the following morning. I didn't have to wait long. At 9 sharp, a black and white cruiser pulled into my driveway. Deputy Harlan stepped out, tall and calm with a clipboard in one hand and mirrored sunglasses that never once betrayed what he was thinking. "I reviewed your footage," he said without introduction. "That HOA employee had no legal right to be on your dock." "Glad you agree," I said, handing him the file folder with the deed and survey. He flipped through the pages slowly. "You're well prepared. That makes my job easier." I nodded. "You'll want to know they've also issued me a fine." $500. No hearing, no process, just a letter taped to my gate. He raised an eyebrow. That's not enforceable. You've got documentation proving this is private property. This isn't a civil dispute, it's attempted property interference. As we talked, a familiar shrill voice carried down the street. What is going on here? Odessa appeared from around the corner, arms flailing like she was directing traffic in a panic. She had 3 board members following her, all of them red-faced and winded from trying to keep up. I could see the papers in her hand from 20 feet away, probably another bogus notice. "You can't bring law enforcement into HOA matters," she shouted, stomping toward us like she owned the asphalt. Harlan didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this is a criminal investigation now. You're advised to remain quiet unless you're asked a question." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. He turned to me. "Have you had any other unauthorized attempts to access your property?" "Not since yesterday," I said. "But the first incident happened 3 weeks ago. Someone pried open the dock storage bin, didn't take anything, but they left the lid cracked and damaged." Odessa jumped in. "That's because you're hoarding association flotation equipment. Those are meant to be shared." Harlan turned his head toward her slowly. "You're admitting to entering his dock storage without permission." Her face twitched. "No, because that's trespassing, ma'am. And if you instructed someone else to do it, that's conspiracy." One of the board members behind her muttered something and began backing away. Odessa's voice quivered. "This is ridiculous. This entire neighborhood has used that dock for years. It's tradition." Harlan nodded. "And that tradition ended the moment the county updated the lot boundaries. The law doesn't protect tradition, it protects ownership. Do you have any documentation showing the HOA has legal claim to that dock?" She thrust the wrinkled HOA map at him, the same one I'd already disproven. He took it, glanced at the date 2003, and handed it back. "This is outdated by almost 2 decades. You've got no legal ground here." "I am the president of this association," she cried. "And I'm the one authorized to enforce criminal law in this county," Harlan replied. "So unless you want to be charged with criminal trespass, I suggest you leave this property immediately." She froze. Not a word, not a breath. Just stood there, eyes wide, hand still gripping that useless map. The silence was glorious. Then, like someone had flipped a switch, she turned and walked away. Not a stomp, not a yell. Just a quiet, tight-lipped retreat, her board trailing behind like kids caught sneaking wine at a wedding. Harlan turned to me as they rounded the corner. "I'll be filing an incident report. You should consider a restraining order if this escalates further." "Already in the works," I said. He gave a nod, tipped his hat, and got back in his cruiser. By the time the sunset painted the lake orange and gold, word had spread. 3 neighbors stopped by to thank me. 2 of them had their own stories of Odessa's nonsense. Pool key revocations, unapproved landscaping fines. One even had a tale about her calling animal control over a bird feeder. I set up a meeting at my place for the weekend. Just a few folks at first. Then 10. Then 20. By Friday, nearly half the neighborhood had RSVP'd, and Odessa? She hadn't shown her face since the sheriff told her to leave, but I knew her type. She wasn't done, she was just regrouping. Saturday came with the kind of weather that made you forget winter had ever existed. The lake shimmered under an afternoon sun, and for the first time in weeks, the neighborhood felt like it belonged to the people who actually lived in it, not the ones who thought they ruled it. My backyard filled gradually. Folding chairs lined up in rows, neighbors bringing coolers, lemonade, even a tray of homemade empanadas from the retired couple across the road. The turnout was better than expected, 37 households by my count. That was more than half the neighborhood. And not a single board member in sight. I stood on the edge of the porch, clipboard in hand, waiting for the last few stragglers to settle in. I didn't need a mic. The tension was loud enough. "I'm not here to run for anything," I started. "I'm not forming some opposition committee. I'm just tired of feeling like every improvement, every decision, Every inch of our property is under surveillance by someone with no legal authority to do what they're doing." A few heads nodded. One woman up front clapped once before catching herself. "I've gathered a few documents," I continued, holding up a packet. "They show the HOA's own charter was never updated after the last annexation, which means several lots technically fall outside its jurisdiction, including mine, including the Sanders place." "And the Connors?" A murmur passed through the crowd. A man in the back raised his hand but didn't wait to be called on. "Is that why they've been ignoring our maintenance requests? We've logged 3 complaints about the storm drain near our curb." Not one response. "That drain is on city land," I said. "The HOA doesn't even have the authority to repair it, but they've been pretending they do while quietly billing residents for the inspections." That got more than murmurs. That got outrage. People looked at each other, started pulling out their phones. One woman opened her HOA account app, jaw tightening as she scrolled. "They charged us for pest control last month," she said. "Said it was a neighborhood-wide treatment. We never saw anyone come by." "They never did," said an older man near the grill. "I checked with the exterminator they listed. They haven't serviced this neighborhood in over a year." The crowd practically hummed with realization. I opened the file on the table beside me. "I've been working with a zoning attorney. She found that several of the HOA's current policies contradict municipal ordinances, including their fining practices and their use of discretionary funds. In fact, the most recent audit done 5 years ago revealed a discrepancy of over $12,000. That money was never accounted for." Gasps. One woman cursed under her breath. A retired Air Force vet near the back crossed his arms and muttered something about embezzlement. "We have 2 options," I said. "We can file a petition for a full forensic audit and force a recall of the board. Or we can take this to the district attorney's office and initiate a criminal investigation." A man in a fishing hat stood up. "Do both." That got applause. Real, loud, cathartic clapping. Someone whistled. I saw people exchanging numbers, forming little circles of strategy before I even finished laying out the petition. By the time the sun hit the treetops, we had 74 signatures. Enough to trigger a recall vote and more than enough evidence to get the district attorney's attention. But things didn't stay quiet for long. The next day, my neighbor Jasmine, single mom, nurse, and one of the most detail-oriented people I've ever met called me in a panic. "They sent a letter to my mortgage company," she said. "Claimed I was in violation of lien conditions. Said I'd refused to pay HOA fees for 6 months. "You haven't," I said, already pulling up the spreadsheet we'd started compiling. "I paid every quarter. I've got the receipts. But they're saying I'm delinquent and that the HOA has the right to initiate foreclosure proceedings." "They can't do that," I said. "Not without a formal hearing and certainly not if your account is current." "I think they forged the notice," she said quietly. "The letterhead looks off. It's not the same font as their usual mailings, and it was postmarked from a different town." That changed everything. I called Nora, my attorney, and gave her the rundown. She didn't hesitate. "That's mortgage fraud," she said. "And if they sent that to a lender using falsified documents, we're talking federal charges. Get me everything. I'll loop in the district attorney's office." We met with the DA's investigator 2 days later. I brought my binder. Jasmine brought her receipts. The investigator, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Amira, took one look at the documents and started snapping photos with her tablet. "You're not the first neighborhood to bring something like this to us," she said. "But this is the first time I've seen it with this level of documentation." She paused on one receipt, then held up the envelope Jasmine had received. "This return address. It's an accounting firm in Fairgrove, but the firm was dissolved last year. We've got a case file on them. Already someone was using their name to funnel HOA funds from multiple neighborhoods into private shell accounts." Jasmine's hands clenched in her lap. "We'll need more," Amira said. "A pattern. If this board's been issuing forged notices, we'll find them." But we need to move carefully. You're dealing with people who already know how to cover their tracks. That night, I got an email from a board member. Not Odessa, her silence was now a screaming void, but one of her loyalists, a man named Greg who'd once fined a family for having a trampoline that violated sightline harmony. The message was short. It said I was creating division, that I was threatening the integrity of the community, that I'd be hearing from the HOA's legal counsel. I forwarded it straight to Nora, who replied within 10 minutes. There is no HOA legal counsel. They've been bluffing. By Thursday, the district attorney's office had issued subpoenas for the HOA's financial records. The sheriff's office was now actively collecting witness statements, and the local news had picked up a whisper of the story after a neighbor's cousin tipped off a reporter with one of the fake Leon notices. That evening, a news van pulled into the cul-de-sac. A young reporter stepped out and started interviewing residents near the mailbox cluster. I stayed back, watching from my porch until the reporter glanced my way and nodded. "Are you Quentin?" she asked. I nodded. "I've spoken to 3 residents who claim they were threatened with foreclosure over phantom fees. Can I ask how you got involved?" "I put a lock on my dock," I said. She blinked. "That's it. That's where it started, but it was never about the lock. It was about control." The segment aired that night. Odessa's face wasn't shown, but her voice was captured through multiple videos filed by neighbors who'd had the foresight to record HOA meetings on their phones. Her tone, her threats, her aggressive dismissals of questions, they painted a clear picture. The next morning, I found something new on my dock gate, not a threat, not a fine, a note. It read, "Thank you for standing up. We've needed this for years." No signature. Just a folded copy of a canceled check made out to Fairgrove Accounting Services, LLC, dated 2 years prior, with HOA admin fees in the memo line. I sent it to Nora. She called me the next morning. "We've got them," she said. "It's not just mismanagement. It's racketeering." By the end of the week, the sheriff's office raided the HOA storage unit Odessa had leased under the name of a shell nonprofit. They found shredded documents, multiple ledgers, and a backup hard drive with years of falsified invoices. Odessa was arrested that afternoon. Her mugshot made the local paper. She didn't scream this time. She didn't even look up. Just stared at the floor like she'd finally realized the lake wasn't hers to rule. The neighborhood didn't cheer. It didn't need to. Justice had come quietly but completely. 3 weeks after the arrest, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically, the houses were still the same mix of lakefront ranches and 2 stories with sun-bleached siding, but something had shifted in the air. Fences got repaired without permission slips. Kids played in front yards without parents glancing over their shoulders. A few seasonal flags even popped up, fluttering defiantly where Odessa once sent warnings for unauthorized decorative displays. The HOA office, if you could call it, that was locked up with a county seal on the door. The mailbox stuffed with unopened letters, and amusingly, one of those bright orange "We missed you" delivery slips. No one had gone by to collect it. Jasmine and I sat at the patio table behind her house, half a dozen legal pads spread out between us. Her toddler napped inside, and the baby monitor buzzed quietly on the table. A gentle breeze carried the smell of freshly cut grass from someone's yard nearby. "They're still digging through the digital records," she said, flipping a page. The DA's office found 3 more fraudulent vendor accounts tied to HOA funds. One of them billed for lake perimeter erosion studies every quarter for 6 years. I raised an eyebrow. "We don't even have shoreline erosion. We have granite banks." Exactly. It was just an excuse to invoice the HOA account, then transfer the money to a dummy consultancy. All of it points back to Odessa's sister-in-law. I leaned back in the chair and stared up at the sky. "So how deep does this go?" "Deep enough that the state's attorney general is involved now," she said. "They think she was using our HOA as a front to launder money. There's a task force reviewing 6 more associations across the county for similar patterns." I let that hang in the air while a squirrel darted across the fence behind us, a leaf stuck to its tail like a flag. Less than an hour later, Nora arrived. She parked her hybrid at the curb, rolled up with a box under one arm and a file folder in the other. Her heels clicked against the patio stones as she approached. "They're charging her with racketeering, mail fraud, and criminal conspiracy," she said, sitting down and dropping the folder in front of us. "The board members who cooperated are getting immunity. Everyone else is being subpoenaed." Jasmine flipped the folder open. "And the financials? Frozen," Nora said. "All HOA accounts are locked until the court-appointed conservator finishes a one-year audit. No one's collecting dues, no one's issuing fines. Your community is officially under independent oversight." I looked down at the ledger she handed me. It detailed every transaction over the last 12 months. There were charges for non-existent landscaping services, inflated insurance premiums, and even a recurring payment coded as board refreshments, $2,500 a month. Jasmine snorted. "She was buying herself wine and cheese with our dues." "Imported," Nora added, flipping a page. "Only the best for our neighborhood tyrant." The doorbell rang inside. Jasmine jumped up, checked the monitor, then motioned for us to follow. We found Deputy Harlan standing calmly at the front door, hat in hand, another folder tucked under his arm. "Afternoon, folks," he said. "Mind if I come in?" We let him in and moved to the kitchen, where he laid the folder on the island and opened it. "I wanted to give you a heads up before the press gets it. Odessa's been indicted on 6 felony counts, but here's the kicker: she's flipped on someone higher up." Jasmine leaned forward. "There's someone above her," Harlan nodded. "A developer based out of Raleigh. He'd been using her to squeeze neighborhoods into early buyout positions, claiming properties were under violation and pushing owners to sell below market value. He'd get the lots cheap, then rezone them for luxury builds." "Wait," I said. "Are you saying she was manufacturing violations to force people out?" "Exactly," he replied. "We've got 2 families who settled and moved out last year after repeated fines and threats. Turns out she'd sent forged compliance letters to their lenders too." Just like what she tried with Jasmine. Nora's face darkened. "That's not just fraud, that's organized property theft." Harlan nodded again. "And it's going to federal court. The feds are coordinating with the state AG to build a case against the entire operation. It's bigger than just this neighborhood." "What about us?" Jasmine asked. "Do we get to rebuild the HOA?" "You will," he said, "but it'll be under temporary receivership for now. A third-party administrator will handle accounting, communications, and board elections until your community votes on new leadership." I asked the question we were all thinking. "And Odessa?" "She's in federal custody. She won't be seeing this lake again anytime soon." For the first time in a long while, nobody had anything to say. That night, the neighborhood gathered on the green near the water. Someone brought a guitar. Kids chased fireflies. Folding chairs popped up in a half circle, and people brought coolers, snacks, even a portable projector to play an old comedy on the side of someone's garage. When I walked up, people waved. A few clapped me on the back. No speeches. No declarations. Just a quiet, collective sense of things sliding back into place. Jasmine sat cross-legged on a blanket with her toddler curled up beside her. Nora stood off to the side, sipping something from a thermos and chatting with a couple who just returned from out of state. Deputy Harlan leaned against a tree, arms crossed, watching the crowd like a silent guardian. I walked down to the dock, not the shared one, not the old one Odessa used to bark about. My dock. The gate still locked, camera still mounted, private and peaceful. I leaned against the post and watched the lake ripple under the moonlight. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter up the hill behind me. Somewhere nearby, someone lit a citronella candle. A dog barked once, then fell silent. I turned back toward the party. Toward the people who'd stood up together when it counted. Not because they wanted to lead, but because they refused to be led by fear. We weren't just neighbors now, we were a community. and no one, especially not someone like Odessa, was ever going to take that away again.